Yeah.
Good morning, Max.
Morning, Tyler. How are you?
It feels earlier this time than it did last time, but it's
It
the
looks
same
like it feels
time.
earlier this time.
Yeah, I just had like a schedule change, so I don't have to. I don't do anything between waking up and work. I know I'm sure some people live a normal life in there, but for me, I don't wake up until I like absolutely have to, and then do the rest of my life after work. So if my shift started at 8 p.m., I would be doing nothing until
Yeah.
8 p.m. Yeah, it's a bit of a kicker. Okay, I gotta make sure we like keep momentum, otherwise I'm gonna fall asleep. I wanted to. So, have you been to climbing.com and seen the story about this chalk beer?
Yeah, 100% because I was absolutely shocked that your text message said that, and I wanted to double check that it wasn't a typo,
Yeah,
that you actually said beer and chalk in the same
yeah.
sentence.
I'm not a beer guy, so I don't know like anything about beer or brewing. I don't know if you have much of a background or if you're just like a casual beer drinker or whatever. But yeah, it's these. What's their name? Wynkoop Brewery in
Yeah,
like Denver. So apparently, calcium magnesium carbonate or whatever is like a typical thing in the brewing process for beer.
which is bonkers. I would have never thought that at all. And it was really interesting to read that the chalk is beyond food grade, right? That's what the article said is
Like
like
climbing
because
chalk
the
is beyond
yeah,
food
it's
grade.
like
Yeah,
medical grade
yeah.
chalk, whatever that's supposed to mean.
It came across
So
to me.
supposedly it's okay to put it in our food.
Yeah, it's the most like Friction Labs thing. Although it wasn't Friction Labs who like started this process. They use Friction Labs chalk in this
Yeah.
chalk beer or whatever. But it's just so on brand for them. Like it just feels about right, you know. Yeah. Do you
You
guys?
know what's funny? I think about Tokyo Powder,
Yeah.
and some of their advertising campaigns, and
Mhm.
people might be a little wary if Tokyo Powder was going into into beer, the old Coca Cola.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, it's I love that they kept talking about how like dry and crisp a finish it
yeah.
was with the
Yeah.
chalk in there.
And I guess like I guess it actually makes sense. We're saying that chalk is actually used to like or not climbing chalk typically, but basically the same chemical is used to actually change the flavor and feel of beer in these breweries, which is like super new to me. So it turns out that this, while it's hilarious to me because I don't know anything about this stuff, turns out it's actually a pretty normal thing, and now it becomes this kind of unique cross branding thing between a brewery in a climbing heavy city and a chalk company. But Friction
That
Labs,
chalk company does a lot right, as far as I'm concerned.
I make fun of them as much as anybody, obviously,
Yeah.
because to me, like so much of it is over the top, and it's obviously expensive. And I personally feel like I don't know, chalk is chalk is chalk. Like
Yep.
it doesn't really matter. But they when Friction Labs sends you like chalk shipments, they usually include these like organic gummy bears. I don't know if you guys sell
Oh
Friction
no, I didn't
Labs.
know that.
Yeah, that's the best part of my day. I don't work at a gym that sells it anymore, but where I used to. So you would like get all the chalk in a box, and then you just find all these little like packets of these organic gummy bears. So I would make sure that I was the guy that opened the box and like hoarded all of these things. So now I'm wondering if you're gonna like get a little 4-pack taster every time
That'd be
you get a
so
shipment of
good.
Friction Labs. But
I'm stocking Friction Labs right away if that's the case.
yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. I'm wondering if they're actually gonna like sell it beyond just the in-house brewery of this place. But anyway, that's the news story that I woke up to. Is that's the crossover potential that we have now is chalk and beer. So good.
I really hope nobody decides to make anything out of recycled chalk is all I have to say. People are always talking about like taking taking the stuff off the chalk heater filters and reselling it, and all of that sounds like a terrible idea as far as I'm concerned. So at least it is their medical grade chalk going into this beer.
Well, I'm a huge fan of double dipping, of like finding the biggest starting hold in a gym and just like scooping the chalk out of that and using that to get started on your project, whatever, like if you're running low in your bag or something. But yeah, like there must be something you can do with that stuff. I don't really know. It's probably a mixture of like chalk, rubber, and
Skin.
skin. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's probably a cure for cancer in there somewhere. We're
I'm
sitting
a
on a
big
gold
fan
mine.
of other people's chalk. That's my whole thing.
Oh yeah,
I'm the guy that doesn't go on a trip with a chalk bag because my favorite brand is yours.
that's really considerate of you. That's
Yeah, I know.
remind me to not travel with you if we ever go climbing, or keep a lock on the bag.
You know what though? I do like when I knew that Technic wasn't going to be making their chalk, the Yeti chalk any longer. We stocked up on Yeti chalk, so I think 2 years ago now, and we still have 5 or 6 containers of their chalk hanging around somewhere in our house. I love
you're
it.
saying you personally, not the gym.
I personally,
like
no, I
you just
personally, I
bought out the
absolutely love
inventory.
Yeti chalk.
What
Yeah.
do you feels different about the Yeti chalk than anything else?
Nothing. It's just
Yeah,
chalk.
that's what I'm saying. I don't even understand, man. Like I can't chalk.
I
Is
don't
chalk.
get it. You know what? I mean, I do notice the difference with chalk and additives on my skin, especially with the amount of chalk that we as setters throw on our digits. But yeah, additives I don't love. I've got really dry hands anyway, and so I try and stick away from that. But yeah, at the end of the day, you're right. It's chalk is chalk, and what I said, Friction Labs does their advertising well. All they're selling is chalk, but you put it in a fancy looking coffee bag and have an outrageous campaign for it, and it just shows how well advertising can do. And when you look at the cost of it,
I know it's like
hard to swallow as a gym. That's why certain chalk programs from other vendors, like for example Tembo, are super attractive because of what they offer. I think the difference most people notice is the grind. You know how fine that chalk is. I think really makes a difference for the hand feel of it, and that it totally informs everybody's decisions about what they're buying.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it sound like, because I'm sure Friction Labs puts a lot of work into their chalk. Like it sounds like their production process and their testing process is very rigorous. I'm just saying that when it gets to my hands, I really don't notice a difference from one to the next. Like
I don't want
that's all I got,
to.
man.
I don't want to quote things that I can't necessarily reference. So I'd like to look for this. No, I do remember reading either it was a thread online or an article about that chalk being tested, and the impurities being in it being just as high as any other impurities in other chalks. So, I don't know. At the end of the day, what's the average customer going to know? Like, I'm going to look at that and say that's chalk. How do I know that it's not filled with heavy metals and other things anyway? So
yeah. What forum did you read that on? Was it like Mountain Project? Just some crusty people just being mad that climbing is expensive now?
It's the Disgruntled Climber Forum on Reddit or something like that, or Ontario Climbing Forum, where everything's disgruntled and argumentative. But
Good.
I do not remember. Do not take this as fact, listeners. But I for sure remember. I just remember looking into it because I was blown away by the fact that people advertise how pure they're. It's like beer companies advertising how cold their beer is. I was like, how's that a selling factor for your beer, Coors Light? Oh.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Chalk still hasn't made it to like the lifestyle kind of advertisements where it's like the pretty girl with the Friction Labs kind of thing, and like surrounded
like a little chalk mustache.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on communal gym chalk? Like I know Block Shop does that, and I was actually talking to that new gym opening up in Scarborough because they're looking at the idea of communal chalk as well. Have you climbed at Block Shop?
Yep. Yeah. I didn't use. Like I brought my own chalk with me. I probably dipped my hands in like once or twice or something like that. How do I feel about it? I think the reason you do that is, well, first of all, just as like a guest service, that's like very nice of you. So I don't
nice.
Yeah, I won't complain about that, but that only is super relevant to new people at your facility that don't have their own chalk bag. And for somebody like me, like if I travel to go to climb at another gym, or if I'm just traveling and happen to stop at another gym, I'm going to have my chalk bag with me. And I might not want to use, even as much as I just said chalk is chalk. I'm in a habit of having my own chalk bag and having it right with me. And so yeah, it's not really the quality. It's just you're used to just like sitting down and jamming your hands in your bag and using your own stuff. So all I would be skeptical of is anytime somebody tries to build a rule to stop people from bringing their own chalk or bringing their own.
I don't know how you'd stop that.
That's not a winning battle. There might be some communities where that's worked and they just like did it from day one and were like really brutally mean about it and like sure, but it's like it's just part of the business at this point. You're gonna have your own shock, so I don't have a problem with it, but I think you're still gonna have lots of people bringing their own stuff. It's the design that Block Shop uses is like fine. It's pretty good.
It's like a gymnastics style, like dunk your hands into two holds and a big. Yeah,
you still get a bit of a mess. Like maybe it's more focused around those bins rather than everywhere else. So I think it's a really good service. I have no problem with that. But it's, in my opinion, it's not entirely worth it. I don't think you get that much return from doing that.
I think it's a cool service, but you know, when I look at the money that I make off my rentals, we rent chalk bags for $3.25.
That's a lot. You guys,
it's a lot, dude. It's a lot of money. But then you look at the fact that I rented out and over $1,000 worth of chalk in 2017.
Yeah, man.
You know, it's a nice little revenue stream, and to me, it just my thing is I worry about actually the added particulates in the atmosphere as well from something like that. I don't know if it would necessarily encourage the LeBron James chalk blowing fanatics more so. And then my other concern being kids, and I'm sure Block Shop doesn't deal with it the same way we do, but like I could just imagine it being a nightmare with our youth program and them all just like chalking themselves up to their elbows and clapping it in the air. And I just, when I can make money off it, I don't see it as a service that's worth doing.
Becomes the equivalent of like water cooler talk, where everybody now just hangs out and socializes by the chalk bucket, and that's just
chalk bucket.
So I'm not a huge fan of it, but if you want to try it, like if it saves you from buying a rental fleet of bags and stuff, then like see how it goes. That's fine. But like, especially you're talking about for a new gym in Toronto, even though it's kind of in an unserviced area, and we should talk about these guys if you visited. Maybe they're going to have a lot of people that don't normally climb, but they're going to have a lot of people that already climb and have their own chalk bags. So like,
how do you combat that? Everybody's going to want to use their own.
Yeah, it's not going to change their experience. So you're talking about Boulder Parc, the one
Park,
in Scarborough at a still like undisclosed location near the zoo.
What if they publicly advertised? Yeah, okay, near the zoo. That's what they said, near the zoo. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, don't give it away.
Is near the zoo. Won't give it away. It is near the zoo. I can tell you that. It's exciting. It's super exciting. It's stunningly beautiful. It really is. And it's huge. The photos do not do that gym justice. I think they're 17.5 feet from the floors right now.
Okay.
So it'll put the wall at a solid like 16, because I think they're doing.
Yeah, like 16,
they'll have to do 16 inches of flooring. Right? It's big. It's wide. That's the thing that you notice that you don't get a perspective of from the photos. It's up the block on steroids. It feels like it's the same length, but it is way wider. Okay. I think it's about 115 feet wide or something.
Yeah. So bouldering specific, you're saying it feels wide. Like, are there going to be walls?
It's 16,000 square feet. It's big.
That's a lot.
It's huge. It's absolutely massive.
I feel like I've only seen pictures of like one particular climbing wall.
Is
that all they're starting with, or are they building?
So they've got both sides. Like up the block, they've got it down both sides.
Okay.
So you think of it like a long rectangle. So you've got the similar style. So you got the variation of angles all along.
Yeah.
With a lot of space to put in a fantastically huge training area, and they've got some other unique features that they're going to be building into that space that I'll let them talk about when they want to advertise about it. And I think there'll be some really cool additions to the space. And they've gone with Impact to be building
Canada,
and they've gone with a beautiful stained wood grain finish to the walls that has a very kind of, boutique-y type feel to it, that Vertical Solutions kind of look. But on steroids almost, it looks gorgeous. And one of the things that I know that the owners of Boulder Parc specifically requested was the way that the panels are laid out. They wanted it to be in a diamond pattern. But what that really means is that the panels, instead of being traditionally like horizontally laid out, are run at these beautiful angles on the walls. So sometimes, I'll be honest, sometimes I find with impact builds, they tend to be pretty linear. So the panels are horizontally placed and they look maybe more, I don't know if there's a good way to say it realistically, but they look very kind of blocky in their shapes. And again, not trying to say anything bad, but that just the aesthetic of Top Rock, it looks very like left to right. Every panel's kind of laid out that way. And now I'm saying it, I'm going to go back and look at the walls and it's not. But the way that they've angled, the angles of some of those panels follow the kind of angles of the walls. It looks really pretty. I'll show you some photos. Gorgeous, really, really nice work. Impact has a very interesting texture to their walls, I find. I wanted to ask you about that, like between the texture and the color of the wall. If anybody's wondering what we're talking about a gym called Boulder Parc, P-A-R-C. You can like look it up on Facebook and find the pictures we're talking about. So it's like it is a deep like brown. So it's a dark color and it looks gorgeous. You felt the texture. How much like chalk do you think that wall's going to hold, and how do you think it's going to age, like just aesthetically It's a really great question. I know from talking to the folks at Impact before and having a look at some of their samples, they have invested a lot of time and money into creating a really good texture for their walls. And one of the things I think they pride themselves on is how easily cleanable they are. Okay. To me, like from a haptics perspective, like touching it feels quite slippery. Okay. Good and bad, right? I mean, it might mean that less rubber will stick on it. It might mean that it'll clean really easily. It's interesting. It kind of feels like a halfway between my walls and your walls, like halfway between base camp and Joe's. Like it's got almost the slipperiness I feel that you'd find in a traditional concrete build. It doesn't seem as textured as.
So yeah, maybe it might be easier to actually like clean, like literally sponge down or magic eraser down.
I've been blown away by the cleanability of our on-site walls. That's really good, like hand brushing off of all the rubber. So I'm hoping, and I know that the last time I looked into Impact panels, that was kind of their goal and I think they've even put videos up similarly to show off how easily it cleans. Yeah. Having said that, like the way that it has been textured and colored, it may not be a massive concern. Those rubber marks might not show up that much, and no matter what color you have on the walls, the chalk's going to show up around those holes anyway. It's just nature of it. Can't beat chalk. It's everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of wondering about there's I know a few places that have done like a vertical solutions build, or one I'm thinking of was, I guess, probably like Leading Edge, like it was like a Timmy Fairfield collaboration. And I love this. It's just like, it's a fairly small gym, but it's the only gym in a fairly big radius universe. It's Crimpers Climbing. They strip the wall, and then the crew pulls out a bunch of magic erasers and they just like wipe that thing down, and it's glossy fresh. That's
nice. Yeah, their aesthetic. Mm-hmm. It was really funny when we got a wall kit from on-site just a couple of weeks after the build that included some extra T-nuts and a tool to tighten our panels, and they also included a shoe. So they'd taken just like a large chunk of white rubber and then stuck it on a paint stick as our shoe eraser, which is fantastic. So when we do a strip, we do the same thing. We'll eraser off the major rubber marks, and most of it wipes off. Unfortunately, most of our in-between cleans involve a lot of sanitization. So, I mean, that's the drawback, obviously, of a super textured wall is people leaving their knuckle, blood, and skin all over it, and your floors. But I'm interested in, because it's such a slick texture. I just wonder, it feels slick. I just wonder how long that's going to stand up. But that's always the question of any any wall that goes in. And I've seen so many different types of builds, and they all have their pros and cons over time, for sure.
So this is kind of like, what is this going to be? This will be the Toronto area's second like shotgun bouldering gym kind of thing. So like Up the Block was the first, and now these guys, and previously like in Montreal, and a couple others in Quebec. Do you feel like there's anything about what you've seen there so far where you acknowledge like that's a big improvement on the format? Because I think the guys that are opening Boulder Parc have probably climbed it Up the Block, and so I'm really interested like what next step they take, what like tweak they make after experiencing probably Block Shop and those guys, but also ourself in Mississauga. Like what is it that they're gonna like tweak to make different? Do you feel like they're making a change, or is it going to be fairly like photocopier-ish?
I was going to say that's a super optimistic perspective of yours to say that the next gym opening up will be developing on the last gym opening up.
I can dream.
Yeah, conscientious conversations with the one owner that we met. I don't want to say too much about their ownership structure. I don't know how public they'll be about it, but the one owner that we spoke with, Edwin, definitely sounds like their vision for the gym is coming out of previous experiences with other places. And again, I probably won't touch too much on it, but a lot of them are coming from the hub. So I think while they're all aware of Up the Block and some of them have climbed there, no doubt, I think what you're actually going to see, because we're kind of east side of the city, is you're seeing a development off that gym. Okay. So it's, for them, it's the progression from the hub. Whereas I think maybe if an industry person like a Jean-Marc opened another gym in Toronto, it would be developing off, I think, the trends and the market. Whereas I think this feels a bit reactionary to their home gym situation for most of them. Okay. So their focus very much so at this point is not anything in their infrastructure. It's in their attitude and community vibe that they're really pushing for. Okay. So how that's going to translate is anybody's guess. Yeah. My hope is that if this is a reactionary measure to the environment they're currently in, that they will be really looking to emphasize, again, that community feel, care of the people coming through the doors and care of the employees.
Do you feel like they're targeting a certain person then? Like that's because it's really easy to talk about community, but at some point you just want to like fill your gym. So, does that just mean they're going to be nice at the desk, or do you think they're saying that there's a particular type of climber that they want to get in their gym?
That's a good question. I think the nice at the front desk is literally every climbing gym owner is like, oh, I've had a bad experience in another climbing gym, so I'm going to make sure customer service is number one at mine.
Pretty much.
Right? So I think they're going to put a huge effort into that for sure. I think they're probably going to choose their staff very, very carefully, given the current climate of our local climbing scene.
Apparently there's nobody available for hire in this city to work at a climbing
Supposedly there's
gym.
Nobody available for hire.
Weird,
That's
man.
what I hear. So yeah, to go back to your previous question, structure-wise, facility-wise, I don't really know if they're going to necessarily be filling gaps or having a particular feature that's going to attract people and say, oh my God, this is the reason why I'm going here. Okay. Because it's so much better than this or anything like that. I think they're going for an overall general improvement on experience. Sure. They're not currently, I don't feel that they're short on space in particular. There's a lot of space left to do things in their building. And there's nothing dramatic about the way that they say they're planning on running it or anything like that. One of the things that they've been very open about is feeling like they do want to be part of the community. They do want to share. I know that Edwin's been chatting with Luigi. I know that he's been we've had a couple conversations back and forth. I'm pretty sure Dustin's reached out to him talking about first set. My just kind of overriding opinion meeting the group is that I think there's still some work to be done towards creating a cohesive vision for that place.
Sure.
And I mean that in the nicest way possible, but I think they also have a challenge ahead of them because they have 5 owners.
They're not the only ones that because that's like I've talked to you about that kind of stuff. It's pretty like every gym trying to figure out, and usually you don't figure it out before you open, right? Like what it is you're going to be.
No.
Which is something I can like blabber on about as much as I want, but I've never been one to put my money where my mouth is and commit to a business plan kind of thing. So I can like just badmouth, but I've never had to do it. But yeah, I'm curious to see what they'll do. Like if there's nothing wrong with opening a gym because you were inspired by another gym's strengths or weaknesses, right?
Yeah.
Like the gym that it sounds like they all climbed at itself was opened as a reaction to another gym in Toronto.
Right. Yeah.
So that's super normal. But I've been thinking just in my head, I was talking to a friend yesterday, and she recently was down in New York and climbed at this gym called GP81. You might have seen it in your feed or something. And she was just like so psyched on this gym. So I checked out the website gp-81.com, and like they're not kidding around with like their target market. They're like, they got a lot of space, but they're just simple angles, like straight up and down walls for strong people. They have 4 links at the top of their website where you normally have like prices, groups, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
It's like about us, waiver, something else, and then youth policy. And you go to the youth policy page and it just straight up says like, we are a 13 plus facility. Like They don't give a shit about everybody else. They're there for, New York seeing more and more big gyms, all the Brooklyn Boulders. There's like a Metro Rock coming in, the Cliffs and stuff. And so they're just there to like worry about like the hard men. And there's not a lot of gyms that open up and like commit right away to a fairly exclusionary group of people, but like it's ballsy. I love seeing it. It definitely gives you a sense of like purpose and meaning, which I know between like you and I, it's a nice thing to have when you feel like you're trying to achieve a particular vision. So yeah,
I agree with you. It's hard to most gyms won't open with that vision. It takes a while. And
it helps to open one of the largest cities, in the world with a huge amount of disposable like income and stuff. So that's not terrible, but yeah.
You know what? I think that model has proved to be effective. Look at Block Shop. They don't do birthday parties, right? This is
at the same time, it's pretty easy to say you don't do birthday parties. Is way easier than I thought it was. Like there's more gyms doing that, but you're still open to kids and groups, and like you're not keeping anyone away. You're really just saying no to like cake, right? Like that's pretty much all it means at this point to say no to birthdays.
You know what? You're saying no to cake at the start, but the external perspective of that gym very much is it's an intimidating place to go climb because there's a lot of burly dudes and intense climbers here. So they have created a culture of that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. That's fair.
But you're right. They are not like, you don't go to their website and you don't get a disclaimer that says don't come here unless you climb B6. So I noticed there was maybe a climbing co-op or a gym that opened in the Red River area this week as well.
I didn't see
or recently.
That.
Did you see that?
That's
on Instagram?
Awesome, though. I'm so to visit.
So I think it's a co-op space as well.
Okay.
That gyms are popping up everywhere.
It's not just the barn on the Miguel's property, is it? Like it's something else.
Probably just with resurfaced on it. No, I think it's actually a co-op center. I don't know. I don't spend too much time on social media these days.
Check it out. Yeah, I'll see what's up. We can talk about it next time, I guess. What else did I want to talk about? I don't know. Is there anything you wanted to bring up? Or like 30 minutes in? I don't know. I will try to not go over an hour just because I'm sure most people have just like stopped watching already. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, guys. Comp season, huh?
Yeah.
It's on us. Around the corner. Isn't that this doesn't start this weekend?
So for the official like Ontario stuff, the first comp
Yeah.
is next week. So like the 20th, 21st, if I have those
Yeah.
dates right, up in Markham. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on the, like part of the organizers for that series, and
Yep.
I feel like I have to not mess it up this year because I'm not like a new guy to it. I have to make sure I don't blow it. But no, I'm really excited. It's gonna be fun. Um, I don't know what
I'm
is it.
assuming registration is already insanely huge.
No, it's good. It's not insanely huge yet. I think most registration happens like the weekend before,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
we still have to kind of like trumpet it. But it's already big, right? Like it's. Think the one thing that's kind of cool this year is in order to get to open nationals in Canada now, there are requirements on how you get there. And so for Ontario, if you're an Ontario Open athlete, you have to show up to one of the Ontario locals or provincials. So that's like because the Ontario circuit has had an open category, but it's never been a qualifying part to get to nationals. There was a separate event for that. So now
Yeah.
for the first time, we're hoping to see all of the Ontario strong people at the same comp as the juniors and the A's, which is, in my opinion, where the actual like strength of our province is. Like it's still
Yeah.
coming up. So what we're kind of dealing with now is like, we have really big comps in the first place. Ontario locals are 5 on 5 off with finals, which is like a huge undertaking. And we're having this debate now where we're trying to deal with if we want to compare the A's and juniors and opens together, they have to climb the same problems. But the difference
Oof.
between the strongest person in that slew of people and the youngest, newest youth A climber is like really big. So for next season, we're having this like internal debate and kind of like getting feedback from route setters and stuff and athletes is if we love this format so much, this 5 on 5 off plus finals thing, that's great. It takes a lot of work, but that's great. But the only way it can work in the future is if we find a way to set it so that it, caters to all of these people. So if we can't do that right now, we have to either say, okay, we don't care about the newest, least experienced climbers and figure out
Yeah.
something else for them, or we let go of the format and move to something like an 8 problem modified scramble where you set problems that cater to the strongest people, but because it's a 3 hour scramble, even that like weakest guy has 3 hours to project and maybe come away with like a zone or a top or something, which
I
is
guess
what
it
most
also
of the other provinces do.
is that
So
right? Yeah. I'm assuming it also depends on what your mandated development goals are, right? Because
yeah,
what are they going on? It's going to be an interesting thing if your format is totally incongruent with an international format that they might be competing in later on down the road.
yeah, it's not uncommon in Canada, like especially on the West Coast, the formats for locals and stuff are fairly like flimsy, but you have to deal with that because it's a local and there's not that much money in it, and it's like it's you don't have to worry too much about the format at a local level. So
Yeah.
in my opinion, Ontario's kind of been overkill for the last couple of years. Doing like a five
Right.
on
Yeah.
five off for all these categories is like that's huge, man. And they're 2 day locals. Like
That's insane.
yeah, that's a really big deal for the gym, for like the volunteers. It's a really big commitment. So I think like any other province would just say, okay, we're gonna shrink the comp format, or like there's always the option of adding a new comp, like a separate open qualifying comp, but you start running out of weekends, and I don't want the entire bouldering season to be monopolized by like sanctioned comps. I think it's like, in my opinion, and I'm part of the sanctioning group. I think it's really important right now for gyms to be able to try out their own formats and try new stuff and run comps that are good for developmental athletes and people that are starting out. And I want to see a replacement for the Tour de Bloc, or a reflourishing of the Tour de Bloc. Like I
Yeah.
want there to be room for that stuff, because the comp formats and bouldering is going to be extremely stagnant so long as the Olympics is this thing that we're worrying about, because every, the IFSC, the CEC, USA, all that kind of stuff, we're going to be, we're going to follow that Olympic format to a T because we want to do well at the Olympics. And so that means we're not going to experiment with cool new stuff. And I'm personally a big fan of like try new formats that are just super crazy and maybe more exciting than the current ones. Because if we're not trying this stuff, like it's just gonna be the same thing over and over. And I'm not personally sold on the current World Cup bouldering format as the best way to watch or compete in bouldering. It doesn't get me that psyched. So yeah, that's anyway, worrying about that for next year. For this year, I'm just really excited, man. There's like 2003 is now the youngest age for the A category, and there's some strong kids in 2003. Yeah. So I'm just psyched on the season. I'm just hyped. I'm ready to go, man. It's gonna be good.
Yeah. Talking about formats is really interesting because we're challenged in our space because of space. So hosting a youth comp is just impossible for us. We couldn't shut down our facility for 2 full days. And this conversation just makes me think about 2 different things. One, we're continuing to rely on our alphabet format for comps because I really like that. So, we set 26 problems, A through Z. And, we do a scramble and climb as much as you can. And the point values of the problems are dependent on how many people climb them. And it tends to be a pretty democratic way to break it down because, it can be pretty subjective when you've got your group of route setters for running problems saying, yep, that is problem number 1. That is the hardest one. Well, yeah, it might be for our group of climbers, but it may not be for your competitors coming. So it takes the pressure a little bit off a setting team. And when we're not in a super competitive format, it's really nice. But it really does, for the most part, if you have people taking that format seriously and climbing as much as they can, then it really does give a good indication of what the hardest climbs are. And more often than not, you find there's an outlier out of a lower circuit that ends up being the most difficult one because it's the one on the slab or whatever. But the thing that I'm really thinking about, and I'm sure a lot of people have thought about, is what's coming to mind as nomad block, and that if we're starting to get to this point where comps are taking 2 days. And it costs a lot for a climbing gym to be closed for 2 days, let alone for the setting time. What's the possibility of renting the nomad block and putting it in high schools on weekends when nobody's using the space anyway? I would love to see that happen. Take the pressure off the climbing gyms. Then comps are not this money losing community-based decision that you make. I would love to see what the room for that is, because it might give us a chance to be able to be a little more creative with our formats, or run these ridiculously long 5-on-5 formats that we want to work. But everything takes time and investment for the logistics of that. There are a couple of companies in Ontario that do build their own climbing gym or climbing walls and tour them around, and I think there's something to be said for the possibility of that being a successful business model. Because if you take that hosting, the loss of revenue away from a gym, all of a sudden comps can actually be potentially a lucrative thing if they're organized well.
Yeah, we're getting towards the comps being more lucrative. We increased registration prices straight up this year because we wanted to make comps more attractive to host, right? But I think the one thing that you have to remember when you talk about hosting off-site events, which is something we have considered for sure, and I'm sure every other PSO, and obviously the States does it for their nationals and stuff, is that you are dealing with a lot of people and you need to have warm-up space. So it's not just the comp wall, you need to have a warm-up wall. That means that there's a lot of costs that stay the same, but they shift from, let's say, the host gym to the province. And then you start, saying, okay, are we going to be insuring these people? How does, is it more cost effective for a gym just to employ their setters for the event rather than us contracting people? Right. So it is super interesting. It is it's certainly something for a comp format like speed. There have been super serious discussions by some people about maybe a governing body needs to buy their own proper speed wall. And you store it somewhere and you pull it out when the weather's nice, and do that, because who in Ontario is gonna whip up the proper 15-meter wall? More gyms are messing around with buying speed holds and putting up proper speed walls, but of an abbreviated height. It might have to be the OCF that buys and operates a speed wall. So it's certainly possible. A speed wall would be way easier because it takes up relatively little floor space. The tent would have to be tall as Like, yeah, I don't know too
Yeah,
many
yeah.
buildings where you could throw up a speed wall, but if the weather's good, you just shove it in a parking lot. You have a bit of a warm up space. It's not all
Yeah.
that different from a World Cup setup. So yeah, who knows? Like it's certainly a discussion, and yeah, we'll
I
see
hear
what
there's a
happens.
speed wall going in a gym in the GTA. I just don't know if that'll be enough to get people to go to that gym.
I think I I think it will. I think people are going to be psyched on that, but it's still not 15 meters, right? Like
Oh,
15.
it's still only 10, is it?
I imagine it'll still be
Yeah.
10 or somewhere between 10 and 15, but like Ontario's still gonna be, an insanely populous area without a proper speed wall. And we got some like sick athletes that are psyched on speed, but they have to go to Michigan and Quebec. And Quebec, like,
Bonkers, yeah.
yeah, it's not easy, man. So yeah.
So that mega gym that's happening isn't, at the end of the day, it's not the Calgary Climbing Center mega gym solution that Ontario potentially needs, is it really?
Well, if you're talking about like a training facility for athletes, probably not. Like
Yeah.
yeah, it's the new hub going into Mississauga, and they have like historically gone towards recreational climbers, and I think they've been really successful with that. I mean, successful enough that their first gym was huge, and their second one's going to be even bigger.
Yeah.
So that's a really good sign. But no, I don't think it's going to be. I like you just look at the original hub, and I don't think competitive training was a huge part of their vision. I don't think it will become part of it at the new facility. Although, like that could change really quick because you are going to see so many athletes from Windsor to Kingston are going to say, yeah, that might be the closest place for me to go for a full-on boot camp, right? If they're training for a combined event, it's the only speed wall like for quite a distance.
Yeah.
So you're going to see a lot of day passes and stuff just on competitors who need a place to train where they, can't train otherwise. So let's see if that changes when the owners start to see, competitors showing up and spending a lot of time there. Maybe they'll say, maybe we should invest in a couple coaches and put together a program because for hundreds of miles, they're the only people. So
Yeah.
if they want to, they could do it. And we've had like really serious international speed competitors come out of far inferior facilities than that one's going to
Yeah.
be. So if they decide to, they can totally do it. But
I
I
won't
mean,
hold my breath.
yeah, I wouldn't either. It's not like nobody looks at like, years of competitive climbing training as like a lucrative thing for your business. So
Yeah.
I don't mind if they don't. I'm just really glad that there will actually be a facility. So that's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
no, it is good for those athletes because there are definitely some athletes that are going to want to start focusing on that third discipline they're
Yeah, man.
entirely missing out on
Yeah.
here.
Actually, that's something I wanted to bring up, and it's super boring, but I keep meaning to do a video about it. So, Youth Olympic Games is over now.
Mm,
Congratulations, gold medals have now been awarded for sport climbing. So sick. That's a thing that happened.
yeah.
But there's still this pattern. Like after the qualifying round, you have to. The only people getting to the finals, the only people for the most part winning medals, are strong in sport or sorry, I should say lead now. Lead and bouldering, and speed is the weakness. If you come
Hmm.
in, there are very few athletes who are strong in speed, and I mean like top 5 or top 10 in speed, who can actually hold up in bouldering and lead. So there's this crazy balance where when you look at like the top 6 after qualifiers, they're all within the top 10 in bouldering and lead, but their speed scores are shit. They're like 18th,
Hmm.
19th, 20th, right? And those are the people winning. So there's still this like imbalance in the combined discipline, which maybe isn't a problem, but I think for speed climbers, it ends up with them just being certainly on the fuzzy end of the lollipop for this sport. And I think that's something like worth discussing, especially because speed climbing is, in my opinion, the closest to like a classical Olympic sport out there. It's obvious who wins. Everything's very simple. It's a really I don't know what the word is, but it's a fundamental sport. It makes sense. And lead climbing, they still can't figure out like how to break a tie. Like that's still a thing where the best athletes are
Yeah.
like, fuck this, like,
Yeah.
yeah. Olympics should have just had speed climbing. It was ready to go from day one.
Yep.
Instead, I like, yeah, lead and bouldering are obviously the historical, like, are really important to the sport. Russia would probably disagree, but I think speed climbing was the one that should have gotten the Olympic spot, and bouldering and lead have to figure themselves out before they get a stage that big. But whatever,
I
we'll see what
totally agree
happens.
with you on that perspective too, and I'm still of the camp that you're not going to ask a hockey player to strap on figure skates and then jump on the speed track afterwards. It's clearly showing with those results that it is a discipline that is so entirely different.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe after it's an exhibition sport, they will realize that exactly what you're saying, that speed climbing is a far more digestible, commercially digestible sport to watch at the Olympics. And the arbitrariness of bouldering and the inability to properly score sport are definitely stand as impediments. And I mean, part of me thinks like, well, why didn't they just throw the fourth in there and have ice climbing in as well? Like,
yeah,
what is really the point of that?
Straight up competitive aid climbing is, I would pay for that. I think we're on the same page, and I think I'm still kind of not done thinking about this, but because of the element of route setting, I think a lot of climbing, like bouldering and lead, get treated as like kind of a pure athletic discipline. But when I think of pure athletics, you have a consistent playing field and you are training for perfection, right? Like literal perfection on a specific task. And speed climbing does that. And to me, that's an Olympic sport. Whereas with bouldering and lead, there's so much that you can't prepare for. And it's not a strategic it's not a strategic element, but there's more of it's almost like it's closer to the game side of sports, right? Because there's an unpredictability, and there is, as much as you're not climbing against somebody necessarily, the route setter is this opposing team in some aspect, as much as they don't get, much verbal credit for it. And I agree that focus should be on the athlete, but it's not, you really don't create your own destiny in bouldering and lead climbing, in my opinion. You do your best to prepare, and then you're thrown a very, unpredictable test at you. So yeah, I think after the Olympics, it's just kind of like further making me think that that we should have just had speed be the discipline for the Olympics for now. I just feel like you're seeing these really impressive athletes, especially on the like open circuit, who are like masters of a sport. Like the world championship speed climbers are unreal, and they deserve to be recognized for that stuff. And they're just straight up not going to even be at the Olympics because speed climbers don't excel in the other stuff. They've never really like focused too hard on that to the level as the others. And I think they're like the realest Olympic athletes, not to denigrate the other climbers, but just in terms of what an Olympic sport is. I think it's the speed athletes that should have it. That brings up a really good point. Does that mean then come Olympics, we're actually not even going to get a good show of speed climbing because the best of them aren't even going to be there? And it honestly, to some extent, that's true for all of the disciplines, you could say, right? Like you're not going to get the top 20 boulders or the top 20 lead climbers as well, because some of them are specialists. But you're not going to see the best, like none of them are going to be there. Like in lead climbing, you're going to see a few of the best lead climbers in the world. In bouldering, you'll see a few of the best boulders in the world. But in speed, they're straight up not going to be there because their scores in bouldering and difficulty are just too low. So that's like a huge bummer. It's just not. It just doesn't feel right, especially because like if you're a boulder or a lead climber, you can make money with sponsorships, right? Like you can go outside, climb something dope, you'll get a movie made about you. If you're a boulderer, you can do the Miho and like do a commercial where you're like climbing up like a school or some shit like that. Like there's routes for money. Like how do you make money as a speed climber, like as an Iranian speed climber?
Right.
Well, I don't know what their government funding is like or anything like that. Maybe it's crazy.
Probably zero.
But like what can you do? Like there's just the speed climbers have been just at the shitty end of all of this, and it's a bummer because their sport was designed for the Olympics, man. Like it's perfect. So that's
anybody's guess how that'll actually end up developing then. And if that sport then stagnates because it's not at the stage that it needs to be at, because facilities aren't willing to put in the proper training facilities, and who knows, hopefully it's not, hopefully it's still a beneficial thing for the trajectory of wherever that sport, speed climbing, is going.
Yeah, I think Europe and Asia will keep it alive, and North America is growing in speed climbing, so that's good. But I think there are decisions that the IFSC has to make over the next couple of years. Like once the first Olympics is gone, and they decide, are we going to change the speed route? Then you have a lot of decisions to make about like, okay, who is this speed route for? Do we want to make it so that climbers who can like crimp their like tits off can like really excel on this thing, or do we want to make it so that you could take some random parkour guy and say, hey, train this for 4 years and you become like a super athlete? I don't know which one's better, but part of me honestly leans towards disconnecting speed climbing a bit from the rest of it and saying this is as accessible as a sport as the 100-meter dash. If you can hold onto a doorknob and you can hit 20 doorknobs up 15 meters really fast, you're an Olympic athlete. That's kind of sick. So that's kind of like where I'm leaning towards. But yeah,
totally.
So anyway, the Olympics, always fun.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting
where's all
thing
that
hanging
Olympic
over all
money
of us.
we were talking about, man? Like where's that like mad traffic? I guess it's not going to come from the Youth Olympics. Nobody knows how to watch the Youth Olympics, but anyway.
Well, buddy,
what's up?
What's up? I don't know. I feel like
should we just end it on that?
Yeah, let's end it on that. I don't know where we go from there.
All right. It was nice talking to you, and we'll try and do this in 2 weeks, like we were supposed to last time. Cool?
Yeah. All right. Thanks, buddy. Always good chat.
Yeah, have a good one, man. See you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.